Good evening, everyone. Please take a second and let us know in the comments where in the shadows you are listening from. Please note, this story may contain graphic descriptions not suitable for all audiences. Ready for a chilling adventure? Let's get started. The Screams from the Valley. This happened to me about 3 years ago, and I still think about it almost every night. I've never really talked about it publicly, not because I'm trying to be mysterious or dramatic, but because every time I go to write it down, it feels too real, too close. But maybe putting it into words will help me process it. It was late August, and a group of us, 6 close friends, went on a week-long backpacking trip through the Sierra Nevada. We'd done a couple of smaller hikes before, but this was the most ambitious trip we'd planned. We were all in our mid to late 20s, experienced enough to feel confident, but not cocky. The first few days were incredible. Beautiful weather, golden light pouring through the trees, crisp air. We were following a loop trail that passed through a deep, forested valley, something that, on the map, looked like a bowl nestled between 2 ridges. It wasn't on any of the popular hiking forums, which we actually liked. We figured we'd have the place to ourselves. We made camp near the ridge, overlooking the valley below. From where we were, you could see the trees thicken as they dipped into the lowland. Mist would hang above the tree canopy in the mornings, slowly burning off by noon. It was quiet, eerily so. No wind, barely any bird calls, just stillness. The first night, we heard it. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to what sounded like a scream, distant but clear. It echoed through the trees coming from the valley. I sat up in my tent, heart thudding. A few seconds later, it came again, long, wailing, high-pitched. My first thought was that it was a mountain lion. They're known to make scream-like noises, and we were deep enough into the wilderness that seeing one wouldn't have been unheard of. In the morning, everyone had heard it, except Rachel, who somehow slept through it all. We talked about it over breakfast, mostly jokes and guesses. Mountain lion, bobcat, maybe even an elk. But the vibe had shifted. The woods felt heavier, like we were being watched. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same scream, only this time it came 3 times. Then a pause, and then something else. A voice, faint, but unmistakable. "Help me!" We all froze in our tents. I remember holding my breath, waiting to hear it again, hoping it was some kind of messed-up animal call. But it didn't come back. The following morning, we were all on edge. Eric wanted to pack up and head back the way we came. Jess said we were probably being pranked by some backwoods campers. Only Kevin, our nothing-can-scare-me friend, wanted to go check the valley. We told him no, we were staying together. But that night, there were no screams, no voice, just silence. I thought maybe it had ended. Maybe whoever or whatever was down there was gone. I woke up to yelling around dawn. Rachel was gone. Her tent was unzipped, her pack still there, boots missing. At first, we thought she'd just stepped out to use the bathroom, but after 20 minutes of calling her name and searching the area, we knew something was wrong. We spread out, staying within sight of one another, scanning the perimeter. Eric found tracks heading toward the edge of the valley, barefoot. We followed them a few hundred yards until they vanished into the underbrush. No drag marks, no signs of a struggle, just gone. We searched for hours, yelling her name, blowing our whistles, even climbing to the ridge to see if we could spot her from above. Nothing. We activated our emergency beacon and waited. It took search and rescue over a day to reach us. When they arrived, we told them everything about the screams, the voice, the tracks. They combed that valley for 4 more days. Drones, dogs, thermal imaging. They found nothing. No sign of Rachel, not even a shoe print. The official report said, missing, presumed lost, or injured. They chalked the screams up to animals and our group's fear and fatigue. But here's the thing. A few months later, after I'd gotten home and tried to move on, I went looking for similar stories. I found a forum post, old, from 2011. A guy described a camping trip with friends in the same general area, said they heard what sounded like a woman crying for help from a valley near their site, said it went on for 3 nights. On the 4th day, one of their group disappeared. No trace. Same exact story. There's no name for what we heard. No explanation. Just that valley, and something in it that calls out in the night, sounding like someone who needs help. And maybe it is someone. Or maybe it's something that wants to sound like someone. Either way, if you're ever camping and hear someone calling from a dark valley below, don't answer. And whatever you do, don't go looking. No service, no escape. It was supposed to be a simple weekend backpacking trip. Just me, my girlfriend Lena, and our 2 friends, Nate and Jenna. We picked a less traveled loop in the Cascades, one that promised solitude, mountain views, and a crystal-clear lake we'd camp beside on the 2nd night. The trail was well marked, weather looked good, and we had offline maps downloaded, just in case. The first day went smoothly. We hiked about 8 miles in, lost cell service around mile 5, which we expected. We made camp in a quiet clearing near a stream, cooked dinner, and turned in early. The next day is when everything fell apart. About 2 hours into the hike, Nate tripped on a root going downhill. He landed badly, twisted ankle, maybe worse. He couldn't walk without help, and even then, it was slow going. We decided to turn back and exit early, retracing our route from the day before. But something was wrong. The first trail sign we came to, one we knew had pointed toward the trailhead, now had a different direction scratched into the wood. It pointed deeper into the woods. We thought maybe it had been turned by the wind or knocked loose by weather. We used the offline GPS on Jenna's phone to double-check, but when she opened the app, her screen was completely black, dead. And then she said, "Wait, I charged this last night." My phone was also drained. So was Lena's. We had full batteries that morning. We decided to rely on memory and landmarks instead. But as we walked, the trail seemed unfamiliar, more overgrown. We crossed a small wooden bridge we hadn't seen before, even though we should have been backtracking. That's when Jenna froze. "Did you hear that?" We all stopped. At first, nothing. Then, crack, a branch maybe 20 feet into the trees. Then another higher up. It didn't sound like an animal. Nate muttered, "We're not alone." Lena pointed uphill. Through the trees, barely visible between the trunks, was a figure, human, standing still, watching. We shouted, no response. The figure didn't move, just stood there. Then slowly they stepped back into the trees and disappeared. We ran, or at least the 3 of us who could. I helped Nate limp along as fast as we could manage. Every so often we'd hear snapping branches behind us, never close but never far either, like someone wanted us to know they were there. When we finally stopped to rest, we found another trail sign nailed to a tree. Same style, same handwriting. It read, "Wrong way." None of us remember seeing that tree before. We camped in place that night, too afraid to keep walking in the dark. None of us slept. Every hour or so, we heard movement in the woods. Quiet, deliberate, like someone circling. By morning, the sounds had stopped. We kept walking, and by sheer luck, or maybe instinct, we eventually came out onto a dirt road. A ranger truck passed by an hour later and got us to a ranger station. We told them what happened. They checked the trail markers and our intended loop. They said that section of the forest hadn't had official signs in over a year. The old ones had all been taken down after a landslide made the trail unsafe. But we saw signs, fresh ones, just like the ones at the start of the hike. Somebody put them back. But why and where they were leading us? We never found out, and I don't think I want to. The trail cam discovery. Last summer, a few friends and I went on a weekend camping trip in a remote part of the Allegheny National Forest in Pennsylvania. We're all big into hiking and wildlife photography, and one of the guys, Ben, had just picked up a trail cam. He was excited to test it out, hoping to catch deer, maybe even a bobcat or a bear on video. We set it up on a tree about 15 feet from our tents, angled toward the edge of our site where the woods got denser. The first night was uneventful. We made a fire, grilled some food, and stayed up late telling stories. The forest was calm, no weird noises, just the usual crickets and the occasional rustle of raccoons. The second night, though, something felt off. I can't explain it well, but it was like the air got heavier after midnight. Everyone had gone to bed, but I stayed up in my sleeping bag reading by flashlight. At some point, I thought I heard sticks snapping, not like an animal crashing through the brush, more like deliberate, slow steps. But when I peeked outside, nothing. Just quiet trees and the faint glow of our dying fire. In the morning, we packed up and got ready to head out, but Ben wanted to grab the trail cam and check the footage. We didn't expect anything unusual. In fact, we were joking around as he connected it to his tablet, hoping to spot some cool wildlife. That's when everything changed. At first, it was exactly what we expected. A deer around 11 p.m., a raccoon sniffing near our cooler just after midnight. Then, around 3:12 a.m., the motion sensor triggered again. The screen showed our campsite, dark and still, until something moved at the edge of the frame. It was a person, crawling, naked. They were on all fours, moving with this unnatural smoothness, almost like they were gliding. The figure crept out from the woods and paused just before entering the clearing where our tents were. They just watched, head tilted slightly. No sound, no sudden movement, just this slow, eerie stillness as they stared in the direction of our tents. The footage showed them crouching behind a tree, no more than 10 feet from where I had been sleeping. They stayed there for nearly 20 minutes, barely moving, before backing away into the woods, still on all fours, until they vanished into the darkness. We sat there in total silence after the footage ended. Nobody said a word for at least a minute. Then Ben muttered, "What the hell was that?" And we all started asking each other the same thing. It wasn't a prank. None of us left the tents. And it sure as hell wasn't some animal. We checked the area around the tree, and there were faint handprints in the dirt, human ones. We packed up fast and left without looking back. Nobody wanted to talk much on the drive home, but later that night, Ben texted us all saying he deleted the footage. He said he didn't want it on his device, said he couldn't sleep just knowing it was still there. We never went back to that part of the forest. And now, every time I go camping, I can't shake the feeling that something might be watching, just beyond the tree line. The guy who wouldn't leave. This happened to me and two of my closest friends, Eric and Jess, during a camping trip in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. It was late September, right when the leaves start to change, and before the trails get too crowded with tourists. We had planned a 5-day backpacking loop through a quieter area we hadn't explored before. No cell signal, just paper maps and a compass, and that's how we liked it. The first day was perfect. Cool weather, clear skies, not another person in sight. That evening, we found a great clearing near a stream and set up camp. We made a fire, cooked dinner, and were just settling in when we heard footsteps coming down the trail. Out of the dark trees came a guy, probably late 30s, early 40s, wearing a beat-up pack and a wide smile. He introduced himself as Mark, said he'd been hiking solo for a few days, and asked if we minded if he camped nearby. Normally, I'm pretty cautious, but he seemed harmless, friendly. even offered to share some jerky he'd made himself. So we said, sure, why not? It's public land. That night, he chatted with us for a bit by the fire. He told some stories about other trails he'd hiked, mentioned he'd grown up around these woods. He seemed to know the area well, too well. He described some of the places we had marked on our map before we even mentioned them. Eric joked, "Are you psychic or something?" And Mark just smiled and said, "You'd be surprised what you can learn from people." We all laughed, but it didn't sit right with me. The next morning, we packed up and assumed he'd be heading the opposite direction. But when we started hiking, he fell in line right behind us like it was a given. We didn't say anything. It was awkward. Maybe he just felt safer with a group, we figured. That night, he set up his tent near ours again without asking. Still acted totally friendly, but now he was asking weird questions, like if we had family expecting us back, whether we posted our trip online, if our gear was expensive, things like that. Jess later whispered to me, "Why does he care about our emergency contacts?" On the third day, we tried to lose him. We casually said we were going to double back and explore a side trail to a waterfall we heard about, hoping he'd continue on. Instead, he said, "Oh, I know the one. Mind if I tag along?" Of course he knew the one. We couldn't shake him. That night was the worst. He barely slept. Just sat by the fire sharpening a stick with his knife, staring into the flames. He didn't say much. When we got into our tents, I could hear him walking in slow circles around the camp. I didn't sleep. The next morning, Mark was gone. His tent was gone. So was he. And so were our phones. We had all turned them off to save battery, kept them in our packs. Mine was zipped into the inner pouch of my bag. Now the pouch was open and empty. Same with Jess's and Eric's. Our paper maps, gone. Compass, gone. He had taken them all. We were 3 days deep into the mountains with no way to navigate and no contact with the outside world. Jess started crying. Eric was fuming. I felt this horrible cold in my gut, not just fear, violation. He had been in our stuff, watching, planning. We had no choice but to retrace our steps using memory, landmarks, and luck. It took us 2 days, and we were completely off course by the time we hit a road. We flagged down a driver and called the police. We filed a report, gave them everything we remembered about Mark, what he looked like, what he said, what he took. They said they'd had similar reports in recent years. Nothing violent, but hikers going missing. Strange encounters, gear stolen. They hadn't caught anyone, no fingerprints, no ID. They said it was possible Mark wasn't his real name. That was 7 months ago. To this day, none of our phones were recovered. He didn't try to use them, didn't sell them. It was like he just wanted us lost. I still go hiking, but I never accept strangers into my camp anymore. I don't care how friendly they seem, because out there, when you're alone in the woods, a smile can hide anything. Love horror. Ready to confront what waits in the shadows? Like, share, and subscribe, if you dare.